My son forged my will right in front of me. At 57, I never imagined my own flesh and blood would look me dead in the eye and say, "When you die, everything will be mine anyway." Those words shattered something inside me that I didn't know could break. For 30 years, I built my construction empire from nothing. Every brick, every contract, every dollar earned through blood, sweat, and sacrifice. I gave my son everything: the best schools, a position in my company, unconditional love. But greed corrupts, even family bonds. When I caught him red-handed with forged documents, changing my will to cut out his sister entirely, I realized I'd been blind to the monster I'd raised. My son forged my will, thinking I was too weak to fight back. He was dead wrong. What happened next destroyed his perfect life and taught him that underestimating your father can cost you everything. Before I continue, subscribe and hit the notification bell because we publish new stories daily. Leave your like and tell us in the comments which city and country you're watching from. Complete script. My son forged my will right in front of me. At 57 years old, after 3 decades of building my construction company from the ground up, I never thought I'd witness my own child commit such an unforgivable betrayal. But there I was, standing in my home office doorway, watching my 32-year-old son Marcus carefully alter legal documents that would determine my family's future after I'm gone. "When you die, everything will be mine anyway," he said, without even looking up from the papers spread across my mahogany desk. Those 10 words changed everything between us forever. My name is John Patterson, and I'm 57 years old. I've spent my entire adult life building Patterson Construction from a one-man operation working out of my garage to a multi-million-dollar company with over 200 employees. Every nail I've hammered, every foundation I've poured, every contract I've secured was done with one goal in mind: providing for my family and leaving a legacy my children could be proud of. Before I continue, subscribe and hit the notification bell because we publish new stories daily. Leave your like and tell us in the comments which city and country you're watching from. I married my high school sweetheart Sarah when we were both 22. We struggled those first few years while I was learning the construction trade, but Sarah never complained. She worked double shifts as a nurse while I scraped together enough money to buy used equipment and bid on small residential jobs. When Marcus was born 2 years later, followed by his sister Emma 3 years after that, we promised each other our children would never know the financial struggles we endured. Marcus showed promise early on. He was smart, charismatic, and seemed genuinely interested in the construction business. During summers in high school, he'd work on job sites, learning everything from basic carpentry to project management. I was proud watching him develop a strong work ethic and natural leadership abilities. Emma, on the other hand, chose a different path. She became a teacher, married her college boyfriend David, and gave Sarah and me 2 beautiful grandchildren. By the time Marcus graduated from college with a degree in business management, Patterson Construction was generating over $8 million in annual revenue. I brought him into the company as a project manager, starting him at a salary of $75,000 a year, more than most experienced managers were earning at competing firms. I wanted him to understand the business from every angle before eventually taking over as president. For 5 years, Marcus exceeded my expectations. He streamlined our operations, improved client relationships, and helped us secure several major municipal contracts. His salary increased to $120,000 annually, plus bonuses that often reached $30,000 or more. I gave him a company truck, covered his health insurance, and even co-signed the mortgage on his 4-bedroom house in the affluent Riverside neighborhood. But success seemed to change something fundamental in Marcus. The humble, hard-working young man I'd raised gradually became entitled and impatient. He started questioning my decisions publicly during staff meetings, undermining my authority with longtime employees who'd helped build the company. He began arriving late to job sites and leaving early, expecting others to cover his responsibilities while maintaining his full salary and benefits. The first major red flag appeared 6 months ago during a family dinner at our house. Emma had just announced that she and David were expecting their 3rd child, and Sarah was excitedly discussing nursery decorations when Marcus interrupted with an unexpected question. "Dad, when are you planning to retire and turn the company over to me?" The directness of his question caught everyone off guard. Emma stopped mid-sentence, and Sarah's smile faded as an uncomfortable silence settled over the dining room. "I'm only 57, Marcus," I replied carefully. "I'm nowhere near ready to retire. Besides, there's still a lot you need to learn about running the entire operation." His jaw tightened noticeably. "I've been working there for 5 years. I know the business better than anyone except you. And let's be honest, you're not getting any younger." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Sensing the tension building between father and son, Emma looked mortified by her brother's presumptuous attitude. "The company will transition when I decide it's time," Primera Saeed firmly. "Until then, you're an employee, just like everyone else." Marcus pushed back from the table, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "An employee? I'm your son. I've sacrificed years of my life working for below-market wages, while you treat Emma like the golden child just because she chose to be a teacher instead of helping build the family business." If you're enjoying this story, subscribe, hit the like button, and share in the comments a similar experience you've had. That outburst revealed a deep resentment I hadn't realized was festering. Emma had never asked for anything from me beyond emotional support and occasional babysitting from her mother. But Marcus seemed to view every dollar I'd spent on Emma's wedding, or every gift I'd given my grandchildren, as money stolen from his future inheritance. The situation deteriorated rapidly over the following months. Marcus began arriving at work with an increasingly hostile attitude, openly challenging my decisions in front of clients and treating longtime employees with disrespect. When I assigned a major shopping center project to our most experienced foreman instead of giving it to Marcus, he exploded in my office. "You're deliberately sabotaging my career," he shouted, slamming his fists on my desk. "Everyone in this company knows I'm more qualified than Jerry, but you keep treating me like some college intern instead of your successor. You'll get your chance to lead major projects when you prove you can handle the responsibility professionally," I replied, struggling to maintain my composure. "Your attitude lately has been completely unacceptable." "My attitude? You're the one playing favorites and holding me back because you can't admit you're getting old and need to step aside." That confrontation marked the beginning of what I now recognize as Marcus's plan to force me out of my own company. He started documenting every decision I made, questioning my judgment in emails that he copied to key employees and clients. He began arriving early and staying late, not to work harder, but to go through my files and computer records. 3 weeks ago, I discovered he'd been meeting privately with our company's attorney, supposedly to discuss succession planning and updating corporate documentation. When I called the attorney directly, he reluctantly admitted that Marcus had requested copies of all corporate records, including my personal will and estate planning documents. "I told him I couldn't provide those without your direct authorization," the attorney explained. "But he was very persistent, claiming you'd ask him to review everything as part of preparing to take over the business." That conversation sent chills down my spine. Marcus was clearly planning something, but I needed concrete evidence before confronting him directly. I decided to install a small security camera in my home office, where I kept copies of all important documents, including my will and estate plans. The camera captured everything I needed just 4 days later. I was supposed to be at a job site across town that morning, but had to return home after forgetting the architectural plans for a meeting with city inspectors. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed Marcus's car parked on the street instead of in our driveway as usual. He had a key to the house and often stopped by when Sarah and I weren't home, so his presence wasn't immediately concerning. But something felt wrong as I entered through the garage. The house was too quiet, and I could hear papers rustling from the direction of my office. I moved quietly through the kitchen and down the hallway, stopping just outside the partially open office door. Marcus was sitting at my desk with several documents spread in front of him, including what appeared to be my will. But he wasn't just reading, he was actively writing on the pages with a pen that looked identical to the one I used for signing important documents. I watched in stunned silence as my own son carefully forged my signature, changing beneficiary designations and altering the distribution of my assets. According to the original will, Marcus and Emma were supposed to split everything equally: the house, the business, investment accounts, everything. But the version he was creating gave him complete control of Patterson Construction while limiting Emma to a small cash inheritance of $50,000. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe, hit the like button, and share in the comments a similar experience you've had. The methodical way he worked told me this wasn't an impulsive decision. He had obviously planned this carefully, studying my handwriting and signature style to make the alterations look authentic. He even had a collection of different pens arranged on the desk, testing which ones most closely matched the ink used in the original document. As I stood there, watching my son commit fraud that would devastate his sister's future, something broke inside me that I don't think will ever heal. This wasn't just about money or business succession. This was about the complete betrayal of every value I'd tried to instill in my children. That's when I stepped into the doorway and spoke. "What exactly are you doing with my will, Marcus?" He looked up with an expression that cycled rapidly through surprise, guilt, and defiance, before settling on arrogance. Instead of showing remorse or attempting to explain his actions, he doubled down. "I'm fixing a mistake, Saeed," calmly continuing to write on the document. "Emma doesn't deserve an equal share of what we've built. She chose to be a teacher instead of contributing to the family business. Why should she get millions of dollars for doing nothing while I've sacrificed my entire career to make this company successful? That company exists because of 30 years of my work, not 5 years of yours," I replied, my voice barely controlled. "And that will represents my wishes for how my assets should be distributed after I die." Marcus set down his pen and looked directly at me with cold calculation in his eyes. "When you die, everything will be mine anyway. I'm the one who understands the business. I'm the one who can keep it profitable. Emma would just sell everything and waste the money on her kids' college funds and family vacations." The casual way he discussed my death, combined with his complete dismissal of his sister's rights, revealed a side of my son I'd never seen before. This wasn't about business succession or family fairness. This was about greed and entitlement taken to a sociopathic level. "Get away from my desk," Primera Saeed firmly, "and hand me those documents." Instead of complying, Marcus continued his alterations. "I'm almost finished. You can be upset about this if you want, but deep down, you know I'm right. The company should go to someone who can run it properly, not be split up and destroyed by someone who doesn't understand what we've built." I stepped closer, my hands clenched into fists. I said, "Get away from my desk. Now." Marcus finally looked up, and what I saw in his expression chilled me to the bone. There was no respect, no love, no recognition that he was destroying our relationship over money and property. There was only calculation and determination to take what he believed he deserved. "You're not thinking clearly about this, Dad. You're getting emotional instead of being practical. In 5 or 10 years, you'll thank me for making sure the business stays in capable hands." That condescending tone was the final straw. I moved around the desk, grabbed the altered documents from his hands, and physically pulled him away from my chair. For a moment, I thought he might actually fight me, but instead he stood up slowly with that same cold expression. "This doesn't change anything," he said quietly. "I know where you keep all your important papers. I know your lawyer's contact information. I know your accountant's office procedures. You can't watch me every minute of every day, and eventually I'll finish what I started here." The implicit threat in his words was unmistakable. Marcus wasn't just planning to forge my will. He was telling me he intended to keep trying until he succeeded, regardless of my opposition. "Get out of my house," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded despite the rage building inside me. "And don't come back until you're ready to apologize and explain exactly what you thought you were going to accomplish with this insane plan." Marcus walked toward the door, but paused at the threshold. "I don't owe you an apology for protecting the future of our family business. If you weren't so stubborn about retirement and succession planning, none of this would be necessary." Even in that moment of being caught red-handed, committing fraud, he was blaming me for his criminal behavior. As I listened to his footsteps echoing through the house and heard his car start in the street, I realized that the son I'd raised and loved for 32 years was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize and couldn't trust. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe, hit the like button, and share in the comments a similar experience you've had. That evening, I sat Sarah down and showed her the security camera footage. She watched in horrified silence as our son systematically forged my signature and altered my will to disinherit his sister. When the video ended, she just sat there, crying quietly. "How did we raise someone capable of this?" she asked through her tears. Where did we go wrong that he could look you in the eye and threaten to keep trying until he steals Emma's inheritance? I didn't have an answer. We had given Marcus every advantage, every opportunity, every expression of love and support that devoted parents could provide. But somehow we had failed to instill basic honesty and respect for other people's rights. What are we going to do? Sarah continued. We can't just pretend this didn't happen. But he's still our son. I'd been thinking about that question all afternoon. The easy solution would be to simply change my will to reflect his alterations, giving him the business and Emma a smaller inheritance. That would eliminate his motivation for further fraud, while maintaining peace in the family. But it would also reward his criminal behavior and validate his belief that he could manipulate situations through threats and deception. The alternative was to hold him accountable for his actions, which meant involving law enforcement and potentially destroying his career and reputation. It would also mean accepting that our family was permanently fractured and that Marcus would likely never forgive us for not allowing him to steal his sister's inheritance. I need to think about this carefully, I told Sarah. Whatever we decide will affect Emma and the grandchildren too. Marcus isn't just stealing money. He's trying to destroy the financial security I've spent 30 years building for our entire family. Over the next 3 days, I couldn't concentrate on work or sleep properly. Every time I looked at Marcus during our daily operations meetings, I saw him sitting at my desk, forging my signature. Every time he spoke about company business, I heard him saying, "When you die, everything will be mine anyway." Meanwhile, Marcus acted as if nothing had happened. He arrived at work on time, participated normally in meetings, and even asked about scheduling a family dinner for the following weekend. His ability to compartmentalize his criminal behavior while maintaining a facade of normalcy was almost as disturbing as the fraud itself. But I noticed subtle changes in his behavior that suggested he was continuing his planning. He had started asking our accountants detailed questions about company valuations and tax implications of ownership transfers. He requested copies of employee contracts and client agreements, claiming he wanted to better understand our legal obligations. He even scheduled a meeting with our insurance agent to discuss updating coverage for changing business needs. All of these actions individually seemed reasonable for someone being groomed to eventually take over the company. But combined with what I'd witnessed in my office, they painted a picture of someone systematically gathering information needed to execute a hostile takeover. The breaking point came exactly 1 week after I caught him forging my will. I was in my office after hours, updating project schedules, when I heard someone using a key to enter the building. Security cameras showed Marcus arriving at 8:30 in the evening, long after all other employees had left for the day. I quietly made my way to the reception area and watched as he went directly to our filing cabinets. Using a key I hadn't authorized him to have, he spent over an hour photographing documents with his phone, client contracts, financial statements, employee records, insurance policies, and most concerning, the corporate succession plan I had drafted but not yet finalized. When he finished photographing documents, Marcus went to my personal office and attempted to access my computer. I watched him try several different passwords before apparently giving up and focusing instead on the physical files in my desk drawers. That's when I decided to confront him again. "Working late tonight." "Marcos," I said from the doorway. He spun around, clearly startled, but trying to appear casual. "Oh, hey, Dad. I didn't expect you to still be here. I just came back to grab some files for tomorrow's client meeting." "Which client meeting would that be?" I asked, stepping into the office. "And why are you going through my personal desk drawers instead of the project files?" Marcus straightened up, and I could see him mentally calculating his response. "I was looking for the Morrison contract amendments. I thought you might have kept copies in your desk. The Morrison files are in the main filing system where they belong. And that doesn't explain why you were photographing documents in the reception area for the past hour. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe, hit the like button, and share in the comments a similar experience you've had." His expression shifted from fake casual to defensive. "I don't know what you think you saw, but I was just reviewing some contracts to better understand our client relationships by secretly photographing them after hours without permission. I don't need permission to understand how my future company operates." There it was. Again, the presumption that Patterson Construction already belonged to him despite having no ownership stake and no formal succession agreement. Combined with his obvious lie about the Morrison contract, it confirmed that Marcus was actively planning to steal not just my inheritance, but potentially the entire business. Your future company? I repeated. Based on what, exactly? Marcus closed the desk drawer he'd been searching and looked directly at me with that same cold calculation I'd seen the previous week. Based on reality. Dad, you're 57 years old. You can't run this business forever. And when you're gone, someone needs to be prepared to take over. I'm just making sure I understand all the details. And you think secretly copying confidential documents and forging my will constitutes appropriate preparation? I watched his face carefully as I mentioned the will forgery. Instead of showing surprise or denial, he simply nodded as if confirming something he'd expected. I was wondering when you'd bring that up. Said calmly, are you ready to discuss this like adults? Or are you going to keep treating me like a child who doesn't understand what's best for the family? His complete lack of remorse was staggering. He was treating fraud and theft as mature business decisions rather than criminal acts that could destroy our family. What's best for the family is honesty and respect for each other's rights, I replied, not stealing your sister's inheritance and lying to your parents. Marcus moved closer, and for the first time since this situation began, I felt genuinely intimidated by my own son. He was 6 inches taller and 30 pounds heavier than me, and there was something in his posture that suggested potential violence. Emma's inheritance? He said with disgust. What has Emma ever done to earn millions of dollars from this company? She chose to be a teacher. She chose to marry someone with no ambition. She chose to have kids she can't afford to support properly. Why should her poor decisions be rewarded with money I've earned through actual work and sacrifice? Because she's my daughter and I love her just as much as I love you, I replied firmly. And because the money and business belong to me, not you, regardless of how much work you've contributed. That response triggered something violent in Marcus's expression. He stepped even closer. Close enough that I could smell his cologne and see the anger burning in his eyes. Everything you have was built with my help over the past 5 years, he said in a low, threatening voice. Every major contract, every expansion, every improvement to our operations happened because I was there working beside you. Emma contributed nothing except showing up for birthday parties and holidays. If you can't see the difference, maybe you're not as smart as I thought. The implicit threats, combined with his complete dismissal of Emma's worth as a human being, revealed the depth of Marcus's entitlement and moral corruption. This wasn't just about business succession. He genuinely believed that Emma deserved nothing simply because she had chosen a different career path. I think this conversation is over, I said, reaching for my phone. You need to leave the building now, and tomorrow we're going to discuss your future with this company. Marcus grabbed my wrist before I could finish dialing, his grip tight enough to leave bruises. For several seconds, we stood there in a physical standoff, father and son, with 30 years of love and trust dissolving into fear and hostility. Don't make this more complicated than it needs to be, he said quietly. I'm not trying to hurt anyone. I just want what's fair. And what's fair is that the person who understands this business should inherit it. I twisted free from his grip and stepped backward toward the door. What's fair is what I decide is fair. And right now, I'm deciding that you need professional help and distance from this family until you can understand how wrong your thinking has become. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. Professional help? Distance from the family? Dad, you're talking about destroying relationships over a simple business disagreement. Maybe you're the one who needs to think more clearly about what's really important here. Forging wills isn't a business disagreement. Marcus, it's fraud. And threatening your father isn't family conflict, it's criminal behavior. I never threatened you, he replied smoothly. I just want you to understand that I'm prepared to do whatever is necessary to protect the future of what we've built together. If that means taking some initiative while you work through your emotional issues about succession planning, then that's what I'll do. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe, hit the like button, and share in the comments a similar experience you've had. The way he was reframing criminal behavior as taking initiative and my objection to fraud as emotional issues showed how completely he had rationalized his actions. In Marcus's mind, he was the reasonable one protecting the business while I was being irrational and short. I realized at that moment that there was no reasoning with him, No appeal to his conscience or family loyalty that would change his thinking. Marcus had convinced himself that he was entitled to steal Emma's inheritance and that my opposition was simply an obstacle to overcome rather than a legitimate objection to criminal behavior. "Get out," I said firmly, "and don't come back to this office or my house until you're ready to apologize and return every document you've photographed or copied." Marcus walked toward the door but paused just before leaving. "This isn't over, Dad. I've invested too much in this company and this family to let poor decisions destroy what we've accomplished. One way or another, I'm going to make sure the right person ends up in control when the time comes." After he left, I sat alone in my office, trying to process what had just happened. My son had physically grabbed me, threatened to continue his fraud attempts, and promised to do whatever is necessary to steal his sister's inheritance. The Marcus I had raised and loved was completely gone, replaced by someone I genuinely feared. I called Sarah immediately and asked her to meet me at the office. When she arrived 20 minutes later, I showed her the security footage of Marcus photographing documents and explained our confrontation. She listened in stunned silence, occasionally covering her mouth in shock as I described his threats and complete lack of remorse. "We have to call the police," she said when I finished. "He's committed fraud, theft, and he physically assaulted you. This isn't about family disagreements anymore. It's about criminal behavior." I wanted to protect Marcus from the legal consequences of his actions. But Sarah was right. He had made it clear that he intended to continue his criminal activities regardless of our objections. Calling the police was no longer about punishment. It was about protecting Emma and our grandchildren from a man who viewed them as obstacles to his inheritance plans. The next morning, I met with Detective Rodriguez at the police station. I brought copies of the security footage, the altered will documents, and photographs of the bruises on my wrists from Marcus's grip. The detective reviewed everything carefully before explaining the potential charges. "Based on what you've shown me, we could charge him with forgery, attempted fraud, theft, and simple assault," Detective Rodriguez explained. "The forgery and fraud charges are felonies that carry potential prison sentences of 2 to 10 years each. The theft and assault charges would likely be misdemeanors unless we can prove more serious intent." "What would happen if we pressed charges, Primera? Askit?" "We'd arrest him, and he'd be booked into county jail pending arraignment. Depending on his criminal history and the judge's assessment of flight risk, bail could be set anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000. If convicted on all charges, he'd face significant prison time and permanent felony convictions that would affect his employment prospects for the rest of his life." The thought of my son in prison was devastating, but the alternative was allowing him to continue threatening Emma and potentially escalating his criminal behavior. I had to think about protecting the innocent members of my family rather than shielding Marcus from consequences he had chosen through his actions. "How long do I have to decide whether to press charges?" I asked. "For the forgery and assault, we need to act within the next few days while the evidence is fresh. The theft charges could potentially wait longer, but it's better to file everything together if you're going to proceed." I left the police station with a heavy heart, knowing that whatever decision I made would permanently alter my family's future. But as I drove home, I kept thinking about Marcus's words. "One way or another, I'm going to make sure the right person ends up in control when the time comes." That wasn't the statement of someone who planned to accept defeat and move on with his life. It was the promise of someone who would continue escalating his criminal behavior until he achieved his goals or was stopped by external force. That evening, I called Emma and asked her to come over with David and the grandchildren for dinner. I wanted to see her interacting with her family, laughing with her kids, living the honest and loving life she had built through hard work and good choices. I needed to remind myself what Marcus was trying to destroy through his greed and entitlement. During dinner, Emma mentioned that Marcus had called her earlier that day asking detailed questions about David's salary, their mortgage payments, and the kids' college savings accounts. She found his questions odd and intrusive, but assumed he was just making conversation. He kept saying things like, "You know, Dad's not going to live forever, and we should all start thinking about the future." Emma explained, "It made me really uncomfortable. Like he was implying something bad was going to happen to you." Sarah and I exchanged glances across the dinner table. Marcus was already beginning to manipulate Emma, planting seeds about my mortality and the need to think about the future. Combined with his fraud attempts and document thefts, It suggested he might be planning something even more sinister than simple inheritance manipulation. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe, hit the like button, and share in the comments a similar experience you've had. After Emma and her family left, I made my decision. I called Detective Rodriguez and told him I wanted to press charges for all applicable crimes. Marcus had made his choice when he decided that Emma's financial security was worth less than his own greed. Now he would face the consequences of that choice. The arrest happened at Marcus's house the following morning. I wasn't there to witness it, but Detective Rodriguez called afterward to inform me that Marcus had been cooperative during the arrest and was currently being processed at the county jail. His arraignment was scheduled for the following Monday, and the detective expected bail to be set at $25,000 based on the charges and Marcus's lack of prior criminal history. Sarah cried when I told her about the arrest. Despite everything Marcus had done, he was still our son. And seeing him face criminal charges felt like a failure of our parenting and family values. But we both knew that allowing his behavior to continue would have been an even greater failure to Emma and our grandchildren. Marcus's wife, Jennifer, called that afternoon, crying hysterically and demanding to know why I had destroyed her family over a simple misunderstanding. She claimed Marcus had explained everything as a miscommunication about business planning and couldn't understand why I would involve the police in a family matter. Jennifer, this isn't a miscommunication, I explained patiently. Marcus forged legal documents, stole confidential business information, and physically assaulted me when I caught him. These are serious crimes, not family disagreements. He would never hurt you, she insisted. You're his father. A loves you. This is all just a terrible mistake that got blown out of proportion. I could hear Marcus's manipulation in every word she spoke. He had convinced his wife that he was the victim of my overreaction rather than the perpetrator of multiple felonies. It showed how skilled he had become at reframing reality to serve his purposes. Jennifer, I have security camera footage of everything that happened. Marcus made choices that led to these consequences. I'm willing to support him through the legal process, but I won't pretend that serious crimes are simple misunderstandings. She hung up on me, but called back an hour later asking if I would pay Marquise's bail money. The irony wasn't lost on me. She wanted me to use my money to free the man who had tried to steal my daughter's inheritance and threatened to continue his criminal behavior. Marcus was released on bail 3 days later after Jennifer apparently borrowed money from her parents to pay the $25,000 bond. He didn't call or visit, but I received a certified letter from an attorney informing me that Marcus was suing for wrongful termination, defamation, and emotional distress related to his arrest and dismissal from Patterson Construction. The lawsuit claimed that I had maliciously prosecuted my son based on misunderstandings about routine business planning activities. It alleged that the security footage had been taken out of context and that Marcus's questions about company documents were legitimate concerns about succession planning rather than criminal activity. Most outrageously, the lawsuit claimed that my decision to press criminal charges was motivated by age-related paranoia and declining mental capacity rather than legitimate concerns about criminal behavior. Marcus was literally arguing that I was too senile to recognize the difference between business planning and fraud. Reading those legal documents was like receiving a final confirmation that the son I had raised was completely gone. Not only was Marcus unwilling to accept responsibility for his criminal behavior, he was now attacking my mental competency and reputation in order to avoid consequences for his actions. The lawsuit demanded $2.4 million in damages, almost exactly the amount Marcus stood to lose if Emma received her full inheritance under my original will. It was his final attempt to steal his sister's future through legal manipulation rather than outright fraud. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe, hit the like button, and share in the comments a similar experience you've had. I forwarded the lawsuit to my attorney, who reviewed it carefully before providing his assessment. This is what we call a SLAPP suit. Strategic litigation against public participation. Marcus is using the legal system to punish you for exercising your right to report criminal behavior. The good news is that most of his claims are frivolous and will likely be dismissed quickly. The bad news is that defending against even frivolous lawsuits can be expensive and time-consuming. How expensive? I asked. Probably $50,000 to $75,000 in legal fees if it goes to trial. Much less if we can get it dismissed early. which I think we can. The security footage and police reports make his claims about misunderstandings completely unsustainable. So Marcus was going to cost me tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees on top of the emotional devastation he had already caused. But I was determined not to let him use the court system to escape accountability for his crimes or intimidate me into dropping the criminal charges. The criminal trial was scheduled for 6 months later. In the meantime, Marcus continued his campaign of manipulation and retaliation. He contacted several of our major clients, claiming that I was suffering from stress-related mental health issues that were affecting my judgment and business decisions. He suggested that they might want to consider switching to competing contractors until the situation with Patterson Construction was resolved. 3 clients canceled contracts worth a combined $400,000. Marcus's sabotage was now threatening the financial stability of the business he claimed to want to protect. But his actions made perfect sense from his perspective. If he could damage the company's reputation and financial position, he could argue that my mismanagement proved he should have been in control all along. I hired a private investigator to document Marcus's interference with our business relationships. Within 2 weeks, we had recorded phone calls and email evidence showing that he was systematically contacting clients and spreading false information about my mental capacity and business judgment. Armed with this evidence, my attorney filed for a restraining order preventing Marcus from contacting Patterson Construction's clients or employees. We also added charges of commercial interference and defamation to the existing criminal case. Marcus responded by escalating his attacks on social media and local business networks. He created detailed posts describing me as a paranoid father, destroying his family over imaginary slights, and positioned himself as the victim of elder abuse and business inc. Several people who didn't know the full story expressed sympathy for him and criticism of my harsh treatment of my own son. The social media campaign was particularly painful because it attracted support from other business owners who saw Marcus as a hardworking young man being unfairly punished by an irrational parent. They didn't know about the forged documents, the theft, or the threats. They only saw Marcus's carefully crafted narrative about family business disputes and generational conflicts. But the strategy backfired when Detective Rodriguez and the prosecutor's office discovered Marcus's social media posts. Public statements claiming innocence while simultaneously admitting to the underlying behavior created additional evidence for the criminal trial. Marcus had essentially confessed to the business planning activities we were claiming constituted fraud and theft. 6 months after his arrest, Marcus finally went to trial. The prosecutor presented the security footage, the altered will documents, photographs of my bruised wrist, and recordings of Marcus's conversations with our clients where he admitted to correcting mistakes in my business decisions. Marcus's defense attorney attempted to portray everything as family business disputes and miscommunications about succession planning, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury watched my son forge my signature in high-definition video. They saw him physically grab my wrist when I tried to call for help. They heard him tell clients that I was mentally incompetent and that he was the rightful owner of Patterson Construction. The trial lasted 4 days. On the 5th day, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all charges: forgery, attempted fraud, theft of business documents, assault, and commercial interference. The judge sentenced Marcus to 18 months in prison, followed by 2 years of probation and restitution payments of $150,000 to cover my legal fees and business losses. Marcus showed no remorse, even during sentencing. When given the opportunity to address the court, he maintained his innocence and claimed he was being persecuted for trying to protect the family business from poor leadership decisions. The judge was clearly unimpressed. "Mr. Patterson, you have shown complete disregard for your father's rights, your sister's inheritance, and the law itself. Your actions weren't motivated by business concerns. They were motivated by greed and entitlement. This sentence reflects the serious nature of your crimes and hopefully will give you time to reflect on the damage you've caused to your family." If you're enjoying this story, subscribe, hit the like button, and share in the comments a similar experience you've had. As Marcus was led away in handcuffs, he looked directly at me with the same cold expression I'd seen in my office 18 months earlier. There was no recognition of wrongdoing, no acceptance of responsibility, no indication that prison would change his fundamental belief that he deserved everything regardless of the cost to others. Jennifer divorced him 6 months into his prison sentence. She couldn't handle the financial pressure of supporting their household alone while paying legal fees and restitution. She moved back to her parents' house with their 2 young children and filed papers to change their last name from Patterson to her maiden name of Williams. The business recovered more quickly than I expected. Word spread through the construction community about what Marcus had attempted, and several clients actually increased their contracts with us out of respect for how we handled the situation. They saw that Patterson Construction was a company with integrity that wouldn't tolerate corruption even from family members. Emma was devastated by her brother's actions and the destruction of our family, but also grateful that her children's financial future had been protected. She and David used part of their inheritance to establish college funds for all 3 kids and bought a larger house in a better school district. Emma also started a small foundation providing school supplies to underprivileged children, funded by a portion of what Marcus had tried to steal from her. Sarah struggled with depression for over a year after Marcus's conviction. She blamed herself for somehow failing as a mother and worried constantly about our grandchildren who would grow up knowing their uncle was in prison for trying to steal from their family. Therapy helped, but the grief of losing a child to criminal behavior never completely goes away. Marcus was released after serving 14 months of his 18-month sentence for good behavior. He moved to a different state and found work with a small construction company that apparently didn't do thorough background checks. He never contacted us directly, but Jennifer told Emma that he still maintained his innocence and blamed his conviction on my lies and manipulation of the legal system. 2 years later, Marcus was arrested again, this time for embezzling money from his employer and forging his supervisor's signature on purchase orders. The pattern was identical to his crimes against our family. He identified assets he wanted, convinced himself he deserved them, then used fraud and theft to take what wasn't his. He received a 5-year sentence for the second conviction, which meant he wouldn't be eligible for parole until he was 42 years old. At that point, he would be a 2-time felon with no realistic prospects for rebuilding a legitimate career in construction or any other professional field. The second arrest confirmed what I had suspected during our original confrontation. Marcus's behavior wasn't an isolated incident triggered by family dynamics or business disputes. It was a fundamental character flaw that would continue manifesting in different situations until he either received serious psychological intervention or spent most of his adult life in prison. Emma asked if we should try to visit Marcus in prison or offer support during his second incarceration. But Sarah and I had learned from our experience with his first conviction that we couldn't save someone who refused to accept responsibility for their actions. Enabling Marcus's victim mentality would only encourage him to continue his criminal behavior. Instead, we focused our attention on our grandchildren and the family members who deserved our love and support. Emma's 3 kids grew up knowing they were cherished, and that their grandfather had fought to protect their future when it was threatened by greed and criminality. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe, hit the like button, and share in the comments a similar experience you've had. Patterson Construction continued growing under my leadership. When I finally decided to retire at 68, Emma surprised everyone by expressing interest in taking over the business. She had spent years watching me handle the Marcus situation and had developed a deep appreciation for the company's values and potential. Emma enrolled in business school part-time while working as our human resources manager. It took her 4 years to complete her MBA, but she brought fresh perspectives and innovative ideas that helped us expand into commercial real estate development and green building technologies. By the time she officially became president of Patterson Construction at age, Emma had transformed the company into a $15 million operation with over 300 employees. She proved that character and work ethic matter more than gender or traditional business backgrounds when it comes to leadership success. The transition happened exactly as I had always envisioned, gradually, respectfully, and based on demonstrated competence rather than family entitlement. Emma earned her position through years of learning the business, building relationships with employees and clients, and proving she could handle both the financial and operational complexities of running a major construction company. Marcus never acknowledged Emma's success or admitted that his assumptions about her capabilities had been completely wrong. According to Jennifer, he continued insisting from prison that the business should have been his, and that Emma's success was only possible because of the foundation he had helped build during his 5 years with the company. That delusion perfectly encapsulated Marcus's fundamental problem: his complete inability to recognize other people's contributions, or accept that success requires more than simply feeling entitled to it. Even after losing his freedom, his family, and his career through criminal behavior, he remained convinced that he was the victim of other people's failures, rather than the author of his own destruction. Sarah lived to see Emma successfully running Pattison Construction for 8 years before passing away at age 74 from complications related to diabetes. Her final months were filled with pride in Emma's accomplishments and relief that our family's legacy had been preserved, despite Marcus's attempts to destroy it. At Sarah's funeral, Marcus was granted a supervised day release from prison to attend the service. He sat in the back row with a corrections officer, wearing an ill-fitting suit and looking older than his 45 years. He didn't speak to any family members or friends, and left immediately after the burial without participating in the reception. Emma later told me that seeing Marcus at the funeral had been deeply unsettling. "He looked at me like I had stolen something that belonged to him," she said. "Even after all these years in prison, even at Mom's funeral, he still thought he deserved to be running the company instead of me." That observation reinforced my belief that we had made the right decision in pressing criminal charges rather than trying to handle Marcus's behavior as a family matter. Some people cannot be reasoned with, reformed through love, or trusted to change their behavior voluntarily. They require external consequences to protect innocent people from their harmful actions. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe, hit the like button, and share in the comments a similar experience you've had. I'm 73 years old now, and I spend my days watching my grandchildren grow into honest, hardworking adults who understand the difference between earning something and taking it. Emma's oldest daughter is studying engineering and wants to join the family business after college. Her middle child is following Emma's original path toward education, hoping to become a high school mathematics teacher. The youngest is only 12, but already shows entrepreneurial instincts and creative problem-solving abilities. None of them remember Uncle Marcus as anything other than a cautionary tale about what happens when greed overcomes family loyalty. They know he exists. They know he made terrible choices that hurt people they love, but they don't dwell on his failures or feel responsible for his actions. Pattison Construction now employs over 400 people and generates more than $25 million in annual revenue. Emma has expanded our operations into 3 states and established partnerships with major developers and municipal governments. The company that Marcus tried to steal through fraud has become more successful than he ever could have made it through legitimate leadership. Emma recently asked if I wanted to update my will to reflect the company's growth and the grandchildren's college funds. As we discussed the various provisions and beneficiary designations, I couldn't help thinking about that day 18 years ago when I caught Marcus forging my signature and altering the distribution of my assets. "You know, Emma said as we reviewed the documents. "I used to wonder if Marcus might have been right about me not deserving an equal inheritance. I mean, I didn't help build the original business the way he did." "Emma, you built something much more valuable than Marcus ever contributed," I replied. "You built a life based on integrity, service to others, and genuine love for your family. Those qualities are worth more than any amount of money or business success." But what if he had gotten what he wanted? What if you had just changed your will to give him the business and avoided all the legal problems and family destruction? It was a question I had pondered many times over the years. Would our family have been better off if I had simply acquiesced to Marcus's demands rather than fighting his criminal behavior? If I had rewarded Marcus's fraud and threats, it would have taught everyone in our family that criminal behavior succeeds when people are too afraid or too tired to resist it. I explained. You would have lost your inheritance, but more importantly, your children would have learned that stealing is acceptable when you convince yourself you deserve what belongs to someone else. Emma nodded thoughtfully. And Marcus would probably have continued committing crimes anyway. Almost certainly. His second conviction proved that his behavior wasn't about our family dynamics or business succession. It was about a fundamental belief that other people's rights don't matter when they conflict with his wants. Marcus is scheduled for release next year at age 53. He'll be a twice-convicted felon with no professional skills, no family support system, and no realistic prospects for rebuilding a legitimate career. Jennifer has remarried and moved across the country with their children, who now use their stepfather's last name and have no contact with their biological father. I don't know what Marcus will do when he's released, and honestly, I don't spend much time thinking about it. He made his choices, and those choices led to predictable consequences. My responsibility was to protect the innocent members of my family from his criminal behavior, not to save him from the results of his actions. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe, hit the like button, and share in the comments a similar experience you've had. The most important lesson I learned from this experience is that family loyalty doesn't mean enabling criminal behavior or pretending that love can overcome someone's fundamental character flaws. Sometimes protecting the people you love requires taking action against someone else you love, even when that action feels like betrayal. Marcus chose greed over family. He chose fraud over honesty. He chose threats and manipulation over respect and patience. Those weren't mistakes or miscommunications. They were deliberate decisions that reflected his true values and priorities. Emma, on the other hand, chose service over self. She chose education and hard work over shortcuts and entitlement. She chose to build something meaningful rather than steal something that belonged to someone else. Today, Emma runs a multi-million-dollar company that provides good jobs for hundreds of families and contributes millions of dollars in taxes to support schools, roads, and public services. Her children are growing up with strong moral foundations and bright futures built on legitimate achievements. Marcus sits in a prison cell, having destroyed every relationship and opportunity that might have given his life meaning and purpose. He lost his freedom, his family, his career, and his reputation because he couldn't accept that other people had rights that conflicted with his desires. The choice between Emma's path and Marcus's path is available to everyone, every day, in small decisions and major life moments. Do you take shortcuts or do the work? Do you respect other people's rights or pursue your own interests regardless of the cost to others? Do you accept responsibility for your actions or blame everyone else when things go wrong? My son forged my will right in front of me because he thought I was too weak to stop him. He was wrong about my weakness, but more importantly, he was wrong about everything else. Wrong about what he deserved, wrong about what Emma deserved, wrong about what constitutes success, and wrong about what really matters in life. The most satisfying part of this story isn't that Marcus went to prison or that Emma became successful. It's that 3 grandchildren are growing up in a world where they know that integrity wins in the long run, that hard work is rewarded, and that their grandfather loved them enough to fight for their future when it was threatened by someone who should have protected it. When people ask me if I regret pressing charges against my own son, I tell them about my 12-year-old granddaughter who started her own small business selling handmade jewelry to her classmates. She keeps careful records of her expenses and profits, treats her customers with respect, and donates 10% of her earnings to animal shelters. She learned those values by watching her mother run Patterson Construction with honesty and integrity. She learned that success comes from serving others rather than taking from them. She learned that family means protecting each other's futures rather than stealing them. If I had allowed Marcus to succeed in his fraud, that little girl might have learned very different lessons about success, family, and the relationship between effort and reward. Instead, she's growing up knowing that good people sometimes have to make hard choices to protect what's right, and that those hard choices are worth making even when they're painful. My son forged my will right in front of me, thinking he could steal his sister's inheritance and destroy his nieces and nephews' financial security. He was wrong. And because he was wrong, and because we had the courage to prove he was wrong, a new generation of Pattersons is growing up with the values and opportunities they deserve. That's the real victory in this story, not the money or the business success, but the knowledge that integrity survives when good people refuse to let criminals win, even when those criminals happen to be family members who should have known better. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe, hit the like button, and share in the comments which city and country you're watching from. And tell us about a time when you had to make a difficult choice to protect what was right.